the morning we went on the run, and I'm getting a call from him, and his words were, quote, "We are about to go on the most incredible run of your career. Buckle up." And I remember that vividly because I said, like, dude, like, how do you like know that? He goes, "Just watch. I know." And to this day, it's one of the things about my career that just has resonated over and over again is the fact of believing in something bigger than yourself and understanding that things do happen and that so much we try to think we control a lot of the things that happen to us in our lives, when in reality, the only thing we control is how we react to all the things that happen to us in our lives.
Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. Hello and welcome to the Building Men podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. What's up, brother?
What's going on? That was loud.
Yeah, it was loud.
It kind of scared me a little bit.
We're working through trying to, dial in on the intro.
Yeah.
I said before we just got done with a couple other interviews where I was like, I just don't like the way the intro sounds. Like, I want it to be a little more impactful. I like the music, though. I like that's our music. It's like I need to find out what I need to say afterwards.
What's your first words going to be? We could tweak it a little bit.
We'll get there. We're getting closer. We're definitely getting closer. So we're really thrilled to have our guest on today. We have the gentleman's name is Dan O'Dowd. He's a former Major League Baseball executive and current MLB analyst, and he has started a business called Win Reality. What's important now? We'll get into it. But more than anything, we're happy to have a Jersey guy on the podcast. We've been talking to a lot of people from the West Coast. They've been saying it's the best coast. So having a Jersey guy on the podcast, like, that's what it's about right now. What's up, Dan? How's it going?
Yeah, Dennis and Anthony, thanks for having me on, buddy. Yeah, Jersey guys. Haven't been there in a long time, but I was born and raised in Jersey.
All right, so Jersey thing is what exit? What's your exit?
I grew up in a little town called Pine Brook, right off of Route 80. So Montville was the closest big town. Montville, Parsippany, Mendham, Marshtown. That was my area of the woods. You guys are down further. You're towards the other part of the state. So I was up on the other end of the state.
So your exit would have been a Parkway exit. You would have told us about the Parkway.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And then the next question is, I was at a concert at Asbury Park, and so I grew up in, went to high school in the mid '90s, and Asbury was not some place you wanted to go. Asbury was, you didn't slow down, you barely slowed down at a stoplight. You kind of kept it going, and Asbury's gone through a resurgence. It's definitely gone through a renaissance.
You guys are a lot younger than me, so Asbury Park was a big. It was pretty cool when I grew up because it had the boardwalk there with all the amusements and the rides and everything else. So that was a vacation spot that my parents used to take my brother and I down to. And so back when I was in high school, it was different than when you were in high school.
Right. And so it was. There's no more rides in Asbury, but they do it's gone under a renaissance. It's a nice place to visit now, and it's definitely it's a spot. And they did this huge concert on the beach in Asbury. It was a 2-day concert. It was really, really cool that was going on. And the Stone Pony is still there. The Wonder Bar is still there.
Yeah,
and as a Jersey guy, I mean, you have connections to the boss. That was where he got his start.
Yeah.
So. So you grew up in Jersey, North Jersey, and baseball was your sport. Tell us a little bit about what it was like playing baseball. What position did you play? I'd love to learn a little bit about your experience playing baseball.
Yeah, I was a really good high school player, a very, very marginal college player. I went to school at a small Division II program called Rollins College. Back then it wasn't a small baseball program. It was a good baseball program. And that was right outside of Orlando in Winter Park, Florida. So again, I mean, my dad, believe it or not, was a dairy farmer. Our business was O'Dowd's Dairy, which you probably never heard of. But so how I got involved in baseball and how it became a passion for a lifelong pursuit of mine, I have absolutely no idea, guys. It just did. So after I graduated from school, I went to work in the commissioner's office. Back then, the commissioner was Bowie Kuhn. My first real job was working for the Baltimore Orioles in 1982. I started selling tickets on East 33rd Street in Baltimore. So back where the Colts and the Orioles played, they had no ticket windows actually in the physical ballpark, so they had rimmed the entire surrounding area and little wooden ticket booths. That was my first gig. I'd walk every night out with my tickets and my police officer, and I'd sell tickets to the people that would come up and buy tickets for the game. They'd bring me dinner and food and gift certificates because I got to know everybody that came night in, night out. But that was my first job with the Orioles. Long story short, Hank Peters was the GM there, became my mentor. In 1988, he left to take over the Cleveland Indians. I left. I was director of player development, grew into be director of player development, director of scouting, and then I became the assistant GM. I was with the Indians through the end of 1998, and then I started with the Rockies as their GM in 1999, and I was the GM for 15 seasons there through 2015. And then I started working at the MLB Network in 2016. I've been there since.
When did you leave the Orioles to join the Indians? What year was that?
88.
88. So you were there for
the World Series, yeah.
World Series,
yeah.
And then even everything that was going on, just the start of the Cal Ripken, because what was it, 95 when he broke? Yeah,
I was there for Cal's entree to the big leagues. Cal, Eddie Murray, they were the Lynchstones of the team. Believe me, I was so young then. I was like. I was very, very low in the totem pole, let's say that. So, but some great stories is that I used to leave games a lot of times by going through the tunnel and walking out on the field. And I can't tell you how many times late at night the batting cage was down down the line. So the game would be over, let's say 10:30, 11 o'clock. It'd be 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And I hear somebody in the batting cage, and I hear this twat, twat, twat. And I'd always peek in and always be Cal, working on his swing. If he didn't have a good game, he'd be down working on his swing. He was an incredible competitor. Ended up being a really dear, he and his brother Billy both became dear friends of mine as we matriculated in our careers.
When you were growing up, who was the guy that this was your guy? Like for me, it was Don Mattingly. I grew up as a Yankee fan in Jersey, so Mattingly was just the guy that I knew everything about him, every stat, everything. Who was your guy growing up?
It was Tom Seaver. Seaver was my guy.
So you were a Mets fan?
I was a Mets fan. Was not. Yankees weren't really good back then.
Right, they weren't.
The Mets were really good, and I gravitated to the Mets anyway. So I've been a lifelong Met fan. So even though I've run other teams, I've always, in my heart, always followed the Mets, and so I've been a long-suffering Met fan from time to time too.
So when they were calling Brady Tom Terrific, did that make your skin crawl when they were calling him that?
Yeah,
because that's Tom Seaver.
Yeah, he was a god to me. And you know what? I had a chance later in my life, in my career, to meet him. And he was as good a person. You know, sometimes you meet your heroes and they don't really add up to be what you thought they were when you were younger. Tom was everything and more as a human being, too. So he's a really special man.
So I'm interested in, when there are these moments, Dan, that you remember exactly where you are. You remember, it could be, like, for me, like, recently, Kobe Bryant. I remember here when Kobe Bryant passed. I remember everything that led up to it, that moment, and then a couple moments after. You remember things like 9/11, these big moments in your life. But I also think these really positive, emotional moments, you could almost recreate in your head, like, paint the picture if you needed to. Tell us about a time or two witnessing something on the baseball diamond that you were either playing or you were observing as you were working there, or even as a fan, that you could almost sit back and say, God damn, I remember everything about this moment. I could tell you the count. I could tell you what it was doing outside. You could almost recreate that moment in your head. Do you have any moments like that you remember?
Yeah, I call those goosebump moments, the moments that get your goosebumps out. And, for me, there's been a lot of them. The one that probably resonates more than anything, in 2007 with the Rockies, we went on this incredible run. We won. We were 5 games out in September, really giving up for dead. We went on a miraculous run. We won 20 out of 21 games. We ended up sweeping. We got into postseason. We swept the Phillies in the division series, and we swept the Diamondbacks in the League Championship Series. I remember almost vividly every one of those games, but I remember one thing more than any of that. So my dear friend with the Rockies was our president of our club. I was the GM, so I was the head of baseball operations. He was head of the entire organization. And he is the man that brought Christ into my life. And he was an unbelievably Christian human being. And before we went on that run, I remember pulling up to the ballpark the morning we went on the run, and getting a call from him, and his words were, quote, "We are about to go on the most incredible run of your career. Buckle up." And I remember that vividly because I said, like, dude, like, how do you, like, know that? He goes, just watch. I know. And to this day, it's one of the things about my career that just has resonated over and over again. It's the fact of believing in something bigger than yourself and understanding that things do happen and that so much we try to think we control a lot of the things that happen to us in our lives, when in reality, the only thing we control is how we react to all the things that happen to us in our lives.
Yep.
And it's the one thing that, of all the wins and losses, and I've been through so many of them, I've been in the game 40 years. So we were 1 out away in Cleveland in 1997 from winning the World Series against the Marlins.
Yep.
And we coughed it up in the 9th inning. I remember that vividly too. But the wins and losses when you're in the game a long time, they all meld together. Even winning championships meld together. But it's the relationships with the people that you end up remembering more than anything else in your career, especially as you get a little older.
I love that, and I love like, we're all about, that camaraderie, the community feel. It's part of why we're doing what we're doing here. And to segue a little bit into just the team aspect of it, do you remember a team that had all the pieces together, but because the chemistry wasn't there, didn't achieve? I like you talk about that Indians team. I think it was Jared Wright was one of the starters on a team. He threw like 97, 98 as a starter. When starters then were throwing 92, he was one of those guys. Yeah, they had. I still remember that staff that they had that year. So were there any teams that you were around that you felt like, talent-wise, they were shoo-in, but they just didn't have the chemistry? And conversely, maybe a team that was more like the Bad News Bears that didn't have it together. They weren't as good, tactically or their skill, but they were like a brotherhood, and the team helped them become better than they were.
It's funny you talk about the word chemistry, because I always say, because I've been around teams and I'm a huge believer in culture, chemistry is so easy to sniff out, but in this world we live in of analytics, nobody wants to talk about chemistry because it's not measurable. It's an intangible quality when you get a group of players that are focused on something bigger than themselves every single day. Our Cleveland teams, guys, in the 90s, they were like ridiculously good. When you think about Eddie Murray and Omar Vizquel and Jim Thome and Manny Ramirez and Albert Bell and Kenny Lofton, these are all Hall of Fame caliber players. We didn't win in 95, but I thought our season was an incredible season. We won 100 games in a 144-game season because the season started late there because of the strike. But in 1996, we incredibly underachieved. And it's because we didn't create an environment where players were playing for something bigger than themselves. So as talented as we were, we got knocked out in the division series. And we underachieved the entire year. There was a high level of frustration because our talent level was off the chart, but we never connected together. So John Hart and I kind of blew up that team a little bit. We held on to Thome, but Bell left, Lofton left, and we recreated ourselves with David Justice and Marquise Grissom, and we made some incredibly impactful trade. And that team was nowhere near as talented as the 95, 94, 95, 96 team. And yet we got to the 7th game of the World Series. And it's the power of chemistry. It's the power of belief when players play for something. They're playing for the guys that are next to them in the locker room rather than playing for themselves. And it's a hard thing to get to.
Yeah, I remember, 94 was the strike year.
Yep.
That was the Yankees. That was like Donnie Baseball's chance.
Yeah, the Yankees were our main rival through those years.
Yeah, definitely, and that was when
the Yankees were great teams.
O'Neill, he had a batting average in the 380s at one, and it was them in the Expos. They were on a collision course, in my opinion, for the series that year, and then the year after.
I don't know, man. 94, we were pretty darn good in Cleveland too. That would have been a good series matchup. Yeah. The Indians against us, we were really good.
Yeah, I would have loved to seen it. I felt like I was robbed of that in that experience. But
you felt that way.
Yeah,
let me tell you,
definitely. Yeah, and I'll tell you and 95 was the year. It was the Mariners had the Yankees number that year, and Randy Johnson was just a machine.
So we went and played the Mariners after they knocked out the Yankees, and I can tell you guys, that's the loudest environment I've ever been in. I was sitting right next to John, was the GM at the time. We were sitting in the Kingdom. We literally could not hear each other talk, and we were right next to one another. That's how loud that series was. It was a compelling, great series. Great series.
How much does the home field advantage make a difference in baseball?
I don't think it means as much for really good teams as it does in other sports. I know in Colorado, home field advantage was gigantic for us because we could have a whole nother separate podcast on trying to put together a team that plays a mile above sea level. I mean, really, the dynamic of that is just like a whole nother topic to talk about. So that created a huge competitive advantage at home, a tremendous disadvantage on the road. But other than that, I think good teams travel anywhere.
What about, as a student of the game, having played myself, and then a big fan of the game, one of my bucket list goals is to see every Major League Baseball stadium. I just got back from Seattle, so it's T-Mobile Park now, but it was Safeco for a while. Yeah, it really is. And I was such a fan of the old baseball stadium. So like seeing a game at Fenway, while it's challenging and you're kind of squished in there.
No, it's great. It's a great place to see the game. The whole event is great.
Oh,
Same with Wrigley.
That's what I was going to say. For me, Wrigley, that's baseball. And I just think
my favorite park in the game, though, is PNC Park in Pittsburgh.
Totally agree.
That was his. He would tell me that every time. He was like, "You have to go to the stadium."
Got to go out to Pittsburgh, and for us, it's accessible. It's about 5 hours away. There's not a bad seat in that stadium, and the view from home plate, it gives me chills looking at the Roberto Clemente Bridge. It just is. It's such a beautiful place. Do you remember?
Yeah, I almost jumped off that bridge a few times after some losses to Pittsburgh. Walking back to the hotel,
especially when you're losing to the Pirates, right?
Pirates were good back then.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's like the Braves era. That whole thing. That was Braves Pirates. They played some great games together.
Games, yeah.
I think about those Braves teams in the '90s where they had that pitching staff, which was Maddox was on. Even Steve Avery,
Stevie Merker. They're all great. Yeah.
So it's so funny I started thinking about things. I'm on this nostalgic baseball run right now. I'm just you're okay with me?
Yeah, no, this is. I knew it was going to be this. You're like, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm gonna just take control of this. Let me just roll with it.
I love when you were talking about the culture and then segueing into the analytics of baseball. It's like I don't know if it was Billy Beane was the guy that went more of that direction with Moneyball, and it just became more analytic in nature. Where now you see, there's. A righty batter gets up and everybody, the second baseman is playing shortstop and there's two third base, like everybody switches around. And I guess when you're playing trends and things like that, but how much of it is instinct versus how much of it is analytics? And when you're looking at, okay, before you put a shift on, I just got a feeling that this guy's going to hit one down the right side this time. How much of it is analytics versus our mind and our instincts as coaches?
Boy, that's a loaded question to answer. I think there's two types of analytics. I think there's data analytics, which are, very powerful because they're black and white. There's not a wrong answer to them. The problem is when data analytics try to provide answers to a game that's played not in black and white, but in shades of gray. And so there's another analytics that I call human analytics, is what you're getting to, which which is another word for baseball awareness. But human analytics to me are surrounded by the qualities of the human analytics are attitude, grit, and I call qualities of the heart. Qualities of the heart are things like courage, perseverance, love of the game. And the concern I have for our sport is the more collective groupthink that we have on how the game should be played and why the game should be played a certain way, we eliminate the human analytical side of the game, which is the instinct of awareness of great players to make plays instinctively within the heat of battle. And I'm very concerned about that for the future of our game.
And it speaks to, there have just been times, and as a Yankee fan, that Joe Torre would leave in Jeff Nelson for one more batter just because he had a feeling. It was probably better for him to put in Graham Lloyd as a lefty to face a lefty batter, but something about the way Nelson was throwing that day, he left him in, and it's just that instinctual thing that, and without being around the game for as long, you might make a decision just based on what the stats tell you. But I love that the qualities of the heart. That'll be part of the title of the podcast. That really spoke to me. I also wonder about you just mentioned that, the guy that you were working with the Rockies, and he basically, he introduced you to more of a spirituality, and he was like a Christian mentor for you as well. I wonder how the I don't even know how to, the stuff that happens in baseball, those unwritten things in baseball that are kind of, again, gray area as far as character integrity are concerned. I'll give you an example. Somebody hits a home run and they stare down the pitch and they flip the bat. I grew up in a time like the next time that batter got up to the plate, something was buzzing by his head. Or someone slides to the second base and the cleats up.
If the action is based upon emotion of the game, so it's just a pure reaction to, sports are emotional in general, and that's what makes sports so great in our society. So I have no problem if a bat flip is done in the heat of the battle. What I have a problem with if it's premeditated, like, okay, if I hit a home run here, I'm going to do this.
Yep.
That's when, I'm not a big believer in people hitting people, because the command of today's, when guys are averaging 96 miles an hour with little to no command, someone's going to get killed. But there's got to be a way that the players can control the game themselves on the field. And I think we've gotten away from that a little bit, and I think it's taken away from the flavor of our game. And, you want your players to have fun in the game. You want your emotions to be spontaneous and in sync with, what's going on in the game. You just don't want some of the stuff that goes on where watching the game it's premeditated. Like they thought through this act.
Right.
Before that act happened. And I always was a big believer that guys that act like they've done it before, they're the best players in the game, because as soon as they do it, they're focused on the very next time. They're not focused on what they just did.
And there's that internal policing that happens. Like if you're Robin Ventura and you're going to charge them out to Nolan Ryan, you got to get ready for the beatdown you're about to receive from one of the greatest pitchers of all time.
Or, if you got the right culture on your team, your teammates are calling you out, because if you show up that pitcher, there's a pretty good chance that I'm the one who's going to get hit the next time up. And so if you have a culture where, hey, we do things because we're really good, so we don't really need to act like we're really good, because we just need to keep playing like we're really good. Those are the best teams.
So when you're I played college baseball. I coached high school sports. I've coached my brother. I actually I wanted to be a teacher because I was coaching Anthony's T-ball team. I'm 14 years older than my brother. Sure. And that's how I got into to get into teaching, was I was coaching his T-ball team. So I always loved that aspect of it, the teaching, the coaching aspect. And to me, it was my job as the coach to really keep an eye on the culture of the team. You mentioned that word culture, to keep an eye on the culture of the team. It was one thing to do that with high school kids. What is that like when you're dealing with, maybe the manager of the team is making $850,000 or $1 million, and you have the payroll of the team $175 million? What is it like as a Major League Baseball coach, from your perspective, to create culture when there's these gigantic egos and there's people that are making a lot of money doing what they're doing?
Honestly, you're going to get a chuckle out of this answer. It's no different than coaching T-ball kids. For me, I found there's two types of coaches in the game. There's transformational coaches and there's transactional coaches. Transactional coach they're based on conditional love. So they love you when you perform well, and they don't love you when you don't perform well. Transformational coaches, and they love you all the time, and they dig in on you. And there's two types of relationships. There's passive relationships, and then there's authentic relationships. The greatest managers I've been around the game, the greatest coaches have been around the game. So basically for me, coaches are teachers. Their classroom just happens to be a baseball field, or the locker room, or a bus, or a plane ride, or a breakfast meeting, or just a chance encounter. And, they're hope brokers. I had someone ask me, how do you know a player needs encouragement? And I said, they're breathing. And so the coaches that really understand how to create an authentic relationship with their players, they can take them anywhere. They can yell at them. They can hold them accountable. They can bench them, because that player at the end of the day will know that teacher has their best interest in mind. And the dynamic of that relationship is no different than if you were coaching a high school kid, a college kid, or a major league player.
Yep.
It's just the stakes are a little higher. Unfortunately, in all of professional sports, there's more transactionally based coaches than transformationally based coaches. And what happens in our society is that it's just repeat of history. More transactional based coaches, they begin to coach, and how they coach is based upon how they were taught. So the cycle of life of coaching continues, but it doesn't continue in the way I would like it to continue.
And I think what happens too, Dan, is that especially when we have these superstar athletes that are making, 9-figure salaries, the ownership is like, who can we get to bring in to make sure that LeBron James is happy? We just want to keep him happy so he stays here for the next contract.
Yeah, see, that's a fallacy, though. No one person can make another person happy. That comes from within the identification of that individual. But what a coach can do is create the kind of relationship that he can begin to ask the right questions to help that player on his journey to figure out how to be happy. And ultimately, whether it's LeBron James or whether it's the 10th guy on the bench in an NBA team, it all is the same thing. All LeBron James wants is to be loved too. To be loved, to be respected, and be trusted. And the coaches that do that well, they're the coaches that end up having the best teams, and they have the best sustained success. Like Joe Torre's Yankees, they were a talented team, but Joe had the heartbeat of that club right in the palm of his hand. Every single player on that club loved Joe, respected Joe, and trusted Joe.
Yep.
They could have cared less about the in-game decisions that he made, whether they were right or whether they were wrong. They knew that that guy was all in it for them. And look at the run that he had on. He had an incredibly long run. They were a really talented team. He just got the aspect of human nature down to a science.
So you were charged with finding those transformational coaches. That was part of your responsibility. You need to be able to look at someone, they come in for an interview with you for your ball club. You need to, part of it is finding those transformational coaches. So what did you look for in a coach? What questions did you ask? What character traits did you want that person to have to lead your club in the future?
It's a lot easier as I got older. Earlier in my career, I thought I had all the answers. It wasn't until I was in my mid to late 40s and 50s that everything started to slow down for me. And I started, very simply asking myself and ask other people same questions. Why do you do what you do? Why do you do the way you do it? And what is your definition of success? The answers to those three questions pretty much tell me everything I wanted to know about that individual.
Do you remember a specific interview that you had that there was one answer that you're just like, knocked your socks off, that it just, I'm going to follow this man wherever he leads because the feeling that I just got during this interview?
Yeah, Clint Hurdle was my manager for years in Colorado. And his answer to that was, I do what I do because I want to make a difference in other people's lives. I was like, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. He was a man built for others.
We talked about that book, Season of Life, really briefly as we were getting to know each other. And one thing that Joe Ehrman, who was basically the star of the show in that book, and Biff was the other coach, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Biff was the head coach.
The head coach, and Joe was, his assistant.
The assistant coach.
And they talk about, as they would bring the group of boys together at Gilman, I believe it was, the football team, he would say to them, like, what's your job? And it's to love each other. And what's our job is to love you as coaches. And then he would also tell the kids, like everybody that comes here, if you have, like if talent is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, you just mentioned, people's talent level, the first player versus the 10th player on the bench, it's your job. If you have, 10 talents for this football team, you need to bring 10 out of 10. You bring in 9 out of 10 is just like, someone, if you have only 2 talents, you need to bring all those 2 talents. And that to us as a team, as an organization, that's when we can be successful, is you bring everything that you have. You can't kind of, dog it, or you can't, go through the motions. You have to bring everything that you have every single time when we're together because we love each other as a team.
Yeah, to me, guys, I ended up defining leadership that way. Early in my career, I thought the leaders of the team were the players making the most money or the most talented players on the team. I'll give you an example. One of the best leaders I've ever been around is a guy named DJ LeMahieu, who is the starting second baseman, third baseman for the Yankees now. I acquired DJ in a trade with the Cubs. And DJ is a really quiet, soft-spoken individual, not a guy that you would put in a bucket as being a leader. But he was a leader because he showed up every single day, and whatever he had on that given day, he gave. So if you can get 25 guys to show up on a baseball team, and every single day they give whatever they have on that given day, some days is more than others, then you have 25 guys that lead. It's not your best player. It's not your most expensive player. It's the player or players that show up every day, and you know when they leave that game, they've left it all on the field.
One thing that we talk about often on Building Men, Dan, is trying to understand what masculinity means. If we're going to give a definition to, like, I have a son who's 16 years old, if I want to tell him what masculinity means, to really try and, we're on this journey together to really hone in on what masculinity truly means right now. And one thing we've recognized is the recognition of our own vulnerability.
Bingo.
It's so important, right?
Men don't want to talk about vulnerability. In our culture, vulnerability equals weakness, and yet it's the greatest strength every man has. The ability to express vulnerability to others allows others to be vulnerable, and that's how great, authentic relationships are created.
So thinking about working with Major League Baseball teams, and people walk around like tough guys a little bit. It's tough to normalize that like being able to be vulnerable. Was there ever and you don't have to name the player, but did you see an example of someone in your career that really expressed or showed that vulnerability, and by doing so brought other people on board? Like, listen, I'm like, whatever it was, I messed up in this situation, or I blew it here, I'm feeling really anxious or depressed or something, and by doing so help bring the team or bring another individual feeling closer or like more connected to that team.
It's hard in professional sports. It really is. Jim Thome was the closest I have ever been. Jimmy might have been the best teammate I've ever been around in my career. And Jimmy expressed vulnerability, not so much in words, but in actions, and the accountability for whatever failure that he may have experienced or some way he may have let somebody down. But it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to cultivate, and the leadership of those men day in and day out by the people in uniform have to demonstrate that to players every single day before players get comfortable demonstrating that to each other. And our game is based so much on failure. We play 162 games in 187 days. And you fail, as you know, playing the game. You're a great player if you fail 7 out of 10 times. So vulnerability, the 3 qualities that great players possess for me ties into vulnerability. One is that they love what they do. They don't love it when things are going well. They love it whether things are going exceptionally well or things are going really, really poorly. 2, they're very, very present focused. So they don't think about what's going to happen tomorrow. And the only thing they take from yesterday is the baggage that fuels them to perform today. And number 3, which gets into vulnerability, they control only the things that they can control. And so the men that control those the best are the ones that have that ability to show empathy and show vulnerability because they can take things in and let it go very quickly. The ones that hold on to that, they try to control everything.
Right.
The game destroys them. The game just mentally will kick your butt to the point where either you're going to get flushed out and not live up to your ability, or you'll live up to your ability and be miserable within the journey or process.
That just made me think of a couple ball players and the mental aspect and how it plays into what they're doing. I work with another thing around the mental health aspect of sports and how our mindset really can impact our ability and where we're going based on the what we're telling ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves in our head.
Yep.
And I think of a couple players, you hear about guys who are in the zone, and who knows if this truly exists, but when you just the the ball looks like a beach ball coming at you. And there are other times where guys like Rick Ankiel, who had everything, and all of a sudden he cannot throw a strike, or Chuck Knobloch couldn't get the ball from second base to first base because of a mental block that existed. Have you seen situations that you were like, this guy can't miss, but there's so much going on between his ears that's
Yeah, I've seen more of those than the other ones. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mental grind of the sport destroys more players than the physical grind of the sport. And mental health is a real issue in society in general, but it's a real issue in sport, and it's really an untalked about issue a lot in sport overall. Sport in general is a very, very demanding profession, and these guys live in a bubble world, and they're evaluated based on their performance, but in reality, that's not who they are as people. But everybody that looks at them and watches them perform correlates their performance to what they are as a person. Once a player begins to go down that path, and he can't separate who he is as a person from who he is as a player, those are the tendencies to get to a darkness that is concerning for me in my career.
Definitely, Dan. We've had a couple of guests on that were former athletes in one capacity, never to the extent that you're talking about, but we had a guy on that was a basketball player, and he just signed a big contract to play. Was it Greece?
He was in Israel, wasn't he?
No, I'm talking about Greg.
Yeah, it was in Greece. Yeah.
He signed a big contract. He played college basketball, big dude, 6'8", and signed a contract. And like 3 days before he was heading over to Greece to play basketball, he got into a car accident, and broke a vertebrae and like severed some, and he was never going to play again.
Bones in his back.
Yep. Yeah, it really devastated him, and he went into such a dark depression because his identity was a basketball player before anything else. So I guess my question is then, what can we do if we're working with kids? Say we're coaches, we're working with kids at either a high school, a college, or even beyond level. How do we help them understand that they are a human being with all these other attributes that also plays baseball, that also plays football? Is there a secret sauce there?
Yeah, the secret sauce is you love them and keep reminding them all the time. Like, leadership never takes a day off. Like, if you're leading kids, you don't take a day off. Because if you take a day off, one moment, one comment that you make in a given day might change the path for that individual for the rest of his life. So it's going there, showing up every day that your job that day is to be other-oriented, to love that player and keep reminding that player over and over again how special he is, but at the same time challenging him to be the very best he can be in whatever given activity that he's involved in that day.
I also think about, and I love that, and I think that is what every coach needs to hear. What you just said is every coach needs to hear exactly that.
And a mentor in general, honestly.
Absolutely.
Well, the same thing happens in a weight room, as you know. Like, to me, the weight room, that's the one place that you get to a player more than any other place.
Yeah.
That the weight room is where relationships are life-changing, because they're not on the field trying to master a specific skill. What you're doing is trying to help them master that skill through whatever performance development you're doing with them. But the weight room for me was the sanctuary of turning boys into men.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of discipline, pride, awareness of who they are, reacting to what they can control the right way, being a good teammate, being a good son, being a good brother, whatever it might be. The athlete is much more receptive to the performance development coach within the confines of that environment than anywhere else on the field. That's why for me, performance development coaches are some of the most vital people on a particular coaching staff.
It's interesting when you talked about the way that coaches interact with their players as well. As an educator myself, I spent many years as a principal. I would talk to teachers about the idea of differentiation of instruction. It's not a cookie cutter. You can't treat everyone exactly the same. It needs to be equitable. But it can't just be, I teach this way, I coach this way, everybody else has to fall in line. I think that's more of an old school mentality. But I think now it almost needs to be, we have to have certain things that we are steadfast with. But within that, there needs to be a bit of a gray area where I know if I'm coaching Anthony, the way that I need to speak to him is a little bit different than the way that I'm going to coach Greg, because he needs more of a kick in the butt than Anthony does.
So I was one of the first pioneers in the game with the Indians back in the 90s, putting together individual player plans. And so each child or student in our system would have a plan. It would be a fundamental plan. That would be his growth development. Within that plan, there would be strengths and then opportunities for improvement. I'd never used the word weaknesses, but it was fundamental, then physical. That'd be the performance development plan, then mental, and then that gray area that I never put down, but I talked about a lot, which is spiritual, because I wanted each kid to really begin to identify something in his life that was bigger than what just he represented. I always felt like in a school system, every child should have that, because every child's going to learn at a different pace, be taught in a different way. So every child should have their own development plan. And then my development plans with my players were collaborative. I would sit down with my thoughts, but then I'd have them sit with me and the coach that would be responsible for his development that given year. And collaboratively, we'd work on it, because I'd want that player to participate in an awareness of the areas that he needs to get better at, or he wants help with instruction to get better at.
And the plan that you spoke about, though they exist, it's with classified students. Special education students will have an individualized education plan, and we spend a lot of time making sure students with specific developmental needs or that are disadvantaged cognitively have these special plans, but it really is for everyone. Like, we should be taking the time to do that. So that to me, I totally agree with that as an educator. If you can go back and change the way that schools operate, after what you've seen and players that are coming to you from high school and college into Major League Baseball, what would be one or two things that you would adjust with the way schools operate that would better serve young men and women as they graduate from high school?
Life skills. I think life skills should be taught starting in elementary school all the way through college. So life skills fall into a bucket for me of social interaction, organization of your time, how to deal with confrontation, how to forgive, how to organize your checkbook. Everything that nobody teaches. To be able to, I've hired some of the brightest people in the game. I'm proud to say I've got a career tree where I had at one point in time 11 GMs in the game that I had hired and developed that went on to run teams. But even some of those 11 GMs, when they came to work for me, had no life skills. They were intellectually gifted,
right,
but socially awkward, wouldn't know how to handle confrontation, because confrontation is not a dirty word. It's a fact of life. So you have to be at ease to be able to handle it. Didn't know how to organize their time. So for me, teaching young people today real life skills is just as important as learning, the basics of reading, writing, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think we place enough emphasis on that anywhere in our educational process.
Absolutely. The emotional intelligence is such a greater indicator of future success than IQ. Without a doubt, you're absolutely correct in teaching kids how to handle conflict. Otherwise, they learn how to handle conflict right now through seeing people post negative things on social media, and then how do you blast somebody back? And it's just becoming a very unhealthy way. And then when we don't teach them how to, manage their time, how to handle conflict, how to deal with adversity in their life, if we're constantly, a common theme that we talk about here to parents out there is not solving problems for your kids, letting them experience difficulty and hardship. While as parents, and I have 3 of my own, you want to help them. But also you're doing them such a disservice by solving problems for them. They need to learn, okay, this is a challenging situation. What can I do to adjust and learn from this situation that will help me in the future? Because then when they're, 20 years old, they're 30 years old, and they experience true hardship, I remember how to do this, not mom or dad is going to solve the problem.
And the other biggest thing is the greatest teacher about sport is that, because I have 3 children too, and Chris, my older son, went to Dartmouth, got drafted, played 7 years of minor league baseball. My younger son, Jack, who's 20, is a Division I player, University of Texas. My daughter played high school basketball. One of the greatest learning experience about sports is that when you fail, you then learn what it feels like to succeed. If you're constantly never experience failure, you don't even then have the joy of the sense of satisfaction of doing something well. So then we're robbing our children of one of the greatest gifts we can give them as parents. It's just the joy of achieving something, whatever it might be that they're achieving.
Because then the journey, it's not about that win. It's not
Correct.
about,
and parents have a hard time doing that because they want, parents love their kids so much.
Yes.
They want to protect their kids from all the crap that they went through in their own life. But the crap that they went through has turned them in, hopefully, to the people that they are today.
Yep. So before we get into win reality and what's important now, because I definitely want to talk about that. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your feelings with that like late 90s home run barrage. I mean, I was in college as McGuire and Sosa were going through that, and then Barry Bonds is hitting 73 home runs. So being in the game during the steroid era, what were your feelings? Like, how do you believe about it? And then what are your feelings about the Hall of Fame for people that were going through that era as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I feel pretty ignorant sitting here today about it. To be an executive leading a team through that period of time and not be cognizant of where was going on around me shows you what a tunnel vision I had or lack of awareness to everything's going on within the game. Whether I could have done anything about it in the role that I was in, now that's debatable. I've never been judgmental on players that decided to go down that path because, I carry around so much baggage in my own life that, I'm not going to start throwing stones at someone else unless I've walked in their shoes. Now, think about a sport. Well, let's say you had hypothetically 80% of the people participating in something to improve their performance on the field. The pressure you would have felt as an individual to keep up. So let's keep in mind that there are 5 million kids that play T-ball every year. Okay? There's 150 Division I programs. 900 kids get drafted in professional baseball every year. 90 make it to the big leagues, and 45 of that 90 have a career span of longer than 3 years. So actually earning a living. So when you think about where all these guys start from and the pressure of the grind to get through to actually become a big league player and earn a living, and your window is so short to earn that living, can you imagine the pressure that they must have been under, that they must have felt trying to keep up during that era? And it breaks my heart that I wasn't more involved in trying to educate players that probably mental health-wise going through that must have been a huge struggle. So one, I really do feel ignorant, and I've said that a number of times because I missed the ball on that one completely, and I should have been. Number two, as it relates to the Hall of Fame, I'm a big believer in a bigger Hall of Fame. I don't really know how to decipher the Roger Clemenses of the world because Roger Clemens, for example, was a great pitcher before he took steroids.
Yep.
Barry Bonds was a great hitter before he took steroids. Yep. But ultimately, they did do something that cheated the game. And so I'm a believer that they should be allowed in the Hall of Fame with an asterisk. Because if we went back and looked at some of the other characters that get in the Hall of Fame, if those men were living in today's society, doing some of the things that they did, right, they would be looked at totally different than the way that they look at it. And I'm not a big believer of rewriting history. I think history teaches us something, so I'm not a big believer of tearing down statues and covering up the sins of our past, because I think that's the path that teaches us what we need to do right in our future. But I think it's kind of comical at times that, because I will tell you, like amphetamines during the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s were rampant in our game, rampant. And I understood why, because, man, you try playing 162 games back then is within 182 games. It's physically, emotionally, and mentally, it's almost impossible. without taking something stronger than coffee at times to play the game. But amphetamines were a legal drug too. So it's a hard line for me to draw in the sand like most people do. There's a lot of writers that vote on this that say, if it's a steroid user, he doesn't get in. And I get that. It's just, where do you draw the line now moving forward? So if someone has any type of spousal abuse or sexual harassment charge or anything at all that would show a lack of character and integrity, should they not get into? Where do we stop? Where do we draw the line on making all these decisions? I don't know if there's a black and white answer.
Right. Ty Cobb would not be in the Hall of Fame right now if we're going by standards that we.
It'd be more than Ty Cobb.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And playing college baseball, I lived with 3 guys in like a baseball house, and I was the only one who was not taking steroids. I was a pitcher. I threw probably 87, 88. If there was a strong wind behind me, maybe I hit 90 one time in Florida. But for the most part, I was like a number 3, number 4 pitcher on the staff. Going back, if you would have told me that if I would have taken steroids, I would be able to make it to the show, I would have done it. Going back, I would have done that. I just didn't think I was, it wasn't for me. I didn't think I would have that opportunity. But I
just felt like we, as a whole industry, where we missed the ball is just educating our players.
Yeah.
Because what we still don't know is the long-term effects of steroid use within the game. And we didn't do a great job of educating our players as a whole. And that's because we just didn't have a great collaborative working relationship with the Players Association on issues that are bigger than just playing a game of baseball. So hopefully in the future we don't miss opportunities like that.
So scrupulous question here. So 1997, someone comes to you with evidence that Jim Thome and Manny Ramirez and Albert Bell all are taking steroids, and you have the data in front of you that shows you that this is the case. What do you do with that information? How would you handle it as a GM of a team that has the opportunity to go to the World Series that year?
Well, first of all, the issue is way beyond me, so I certainly would meet with the owner of the team and our upper management team, and I would suggest that we meet with each player individually and confront them on the issues, and then put in place our own stringent testing, and then let them know that if we, in any of their testing, if we found them to continue to do it, we would suspend them, and if we don't win, we don't win. But we begin to educate them on some of the dangers that they may be exposing themselves to by their participation in that activity. Because I told you at the beginning of this podcast, the wins and losses, I've got an 83 World Series ring from the Orioles. I never wear that ring. They're important at the time, but they just aren't important over a long time. And each individual person is more important than any one event.
So my last, question before we get to win would be, who, in all your experience, someone that you saw play in front of you live, who is the best hitter that you've seen and the best pitcher you've seen?
Manny Ramirez and Todd Helton were the best pure hitters I've ever seen day in and day out. Todd Helton's eye-hand coordination was unreal, and it's an interesting story. Todd grew up with a dad, Jerry, that was a big bass boat fisherman. So in Todd's garage, half the garage would have the boat, and the other half of the garage, he had like a little hitting tunnel hit up. And Jerry, liked to drink Budweiser, I think in particular, or Miller, I'm not sure which one, but he'd flip bottle caps at Todd. And Todd could never pull. Think about hitting a bottle cap now. That's not a really easy thing to do with a small little wiffle ball bat. But Todd never could pull the ball into the boat. He got in trouble if he did that because the boat was his dad's bait. So at a very young age, Todd's eye-hand coordination was developed at a level that was, of nothing I've ever seen. Manny Ramirez was a hitting savant. The only place for me Manny was comfortable in his life was in that white little chalk line. When he stepped into the box, Manny was as gifted a hitter that I have ever seen in my entire life. And if Manny hadn't participated in the steroid era, Manny was a first ballot Hall of Fame. He was that great of a hitter.
And then how about a pitcher?
Bartolo Colon, for me, was the best pitcher that I saw. CC Sabathia was the best pitcher I've ever seen in my career. I had a chance to be part of signing and developing both those players, and they were unreal talents from day one.
And Sabathia and Cliff Lee played on the same team, correct? They were on the same team at the same time?
They were. I was gone then, but they were in Cleveland. I was in Colorado at that time, but they played on that time.
It's funny how, that there was it was just this synergistic thing where this group of individuals came together at this specific time. There were some great teams. That took me down memory lane. I haven't thought about those years in a long, long time. Thinking about just as a fan, as a baseball player, going through and watching that. And it
was the best time of my career. We had a great time in Cleveland. John Hart was the closest I ever was with an executive, and those were I'm so happy to have those memories.
Yep. So talk to us a little bit about the win reality, the what's important now, what that is, how you develop it.
Yeah, win just stands for what's important now. So like any industry that you're in for a long period of time, so I was in baseball, been in baseball 40 years, but you begin to recognize holes within the industry. For me, and you'll relate and understand this, is that the hardest thing for me from a development standpoint was to be able to replicate game speed, specifically in the hitter versus pitcher matchup. The only way you could replicate game speed was actually in the game themselves. I found batting practice even in the 80s and 90s to be antiquated. I thought it was an important part of a daily ritual, but there's no way that it emulated any kind of game speed. High-speed pitching machines, which are in vogue today, can replicate spin, certainly can replicate velocity. It doesn't replicate any kind of balance, rhythm, and timing, which I think is the foundational part of hitting. And so in Cleveland, I try to find some technology that could affect this. I couldn't. When I got to Colorado and I was exposed to the differences in environment, meaning that you play 6 games at home in Colorado, you get 5 at-bats a game, you see 120 pitches on a homestand, and the ball doesn't move because you're playing a mile above sea level. And movement's created when you throw an object against mass, it creates movement. You now go to San Diego and you're playing at sea level and the ball moves millimeters differently. And a hitter has mapped and calibrated his swing to that exact same pitch, but now it moves. You can imagine the kind of problems that created in our home road splits. So I really started at that point in time to delve into the world of VR and AR, but it wasn't until I left the Rockies, started a company with my son. We named it WIN because it was an acronym for what I used in development, which meaning is what's important now. So basically what we do is take high-speed game video and replicate it in virtual reality that simulates live at-bats. So it's like you're standing in against a real pitcher facing a live at-bat, because the one tool for me that we miss in our game is we've got 1,000 swing doctors out there that love to teach the game. Our product teaches everything that happens before you get your swing off. It's pitch recognition, strike zone awareness, and it's rhythm and timing. Because the hitting for me is a dance you have with the pitcher. When you're on time, you succeed. When the pitcher gets you out of rhythm, he succeeds. So we have a ton of different challenges in there where anybody from 8 years old all the way up through the major league level can practice those specific skills in a competitive environment that elicits emotion, which most technology doesn't. So it's an incredible product. We have probably 20 major league teams, 150 colleges, and about well over 10,000 just amateur baseball, softball players in the country. You can use it anywhere, so it's not in the confines of a hitting cage. You can use it in your living room, the garage, your bedroom. You can use it anywhere at any time. You can see a lot of pitches in a short period of time, and you can simulate at bats. If you want to sequence fastball, curveball, changeup, or if you want to see all curveball, if you want to see a left-on-left breaking ball, you can sequence anything you want to do in that given at bat. You get immediate results, which for me is a key to coaching, is you get instantaneous feedback, because then it provides you a roadmap for the next challenge that you have in front of you. So you're graded out against other competitors in your age group from all around the country. It's a really cool product.
And so basically, it's a headset. It's like you're wearing. It's like virtual reality.
You buy the Quest 2 headset, and then you just download our software.
Imagine having that growing up.
Oh my
Jeez.
God, I want that right now. I want.
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to be using that.
It really is. It's a game-changing product, and it's because I knew, and Chris looked at it from a playing standpoint. I looked at it from an executive standpoint. That no one teaches this in the game because you can't teach it. So no one talks about pitch recognition skills and seeing the ball out of the hand, because no one knows how to teach that.
It's a game, absolutely is a game changer. Now, is it you can simulate a specific pitcher and or environment where you'll
in each age group you go into the app and you can pick out your age group, and in that age group will come up with a board, and you can pick left hand 3/4, left hand side armor, left hand over the top, right hand the same way, and within that age group will be the distance of what that age group is and the velocity of what that age group is. And the skill levels are all the same. We have 5 different challenges from a pitch recognition skill standpoint, where you have to take the ball, place it in the strike zone, tell us if it was a ball or strike and what the pitch was, to an occlusion where the ball is thrown and gets released and then disappears. And you got to tell us what that pitch was. If you get it right, it gets released closer and closer and closer to the hand. I mean, it's really cool stuff.
That's awesome.
Extremely fun.
That is absolutely amazing. I think about it. I mean, I was a pitcher, but I'm also thinking like through high school as a hitter. Just for me, there was just a couple pitches. For some reason, a lefty changeup I could not. As a righty batter, a lefty changeup threw me all the time. Like that was just a pitch that I just had a really tough time hitting. So to be able to replicate that,
you just didn't see it. If you saw it enough. And I'm not saying that it's lifelike like the game. Nothing elicits the emotion of competitiveness of a live game, but it's darn close. It is really, really like all of our major league players. They don't swing in our system at all. All they use it for is syncing up the rhythm of the pitcher they're going to face that given night. So they go in our system. They plug in Clayton Kershaw, and they get to see it. Then the video coach can sequence exactly how Clayton Kershaw pitched that given hitter in his last time he faced him. So he just goes in there and see all the pitches that he saw from Clayton Kershaw in the last time he faced him, and all he's trying to do is get his timing down. Like, when do I start my swing to get off my ace swing against this guy in a given pitch in a given count? Now, the rest of them on down, they love to swing in it and actually see ball flight and some movement apparatus. But for me, the greatest part of it is we're filling a need for every player to get. The hardest thing to do in the game of baseball is to hit a moving object. But you have an easier time hitting a moving object if you get trained at an earlier age to recognize that object as soon as possible out of the hand, because it gives you more time to make your decisions. You
mentioned Bartolo Colon and CC Sabathia as two of the best pitchers that you've seen live. What were a couple of the best pitches I think about? Sure. Like Rivera's cutter was just deadly.
Yeah. Oral Hershiser's sinker was incredible. I'm not going to tell you, I'm sure, actually, how he did that. But his sinker was literally, you sit behind home plate and you watch Oral pitch. He was a savant from a pitching standpoint. He didn't just make his ball disappear in the strike zone. He could throw it to corners and make it disappear. And it was just incredible. Doug Jones was our closer in Cleveland for years. He had a changeup that was Trevor Hoffman-like. Like, he could tell you, okay, I'm throwing my changeup, and you'd still swing through it. I mean, it was that good. So those are the flashes. Baseball for me is a game of flashes and triggers. Those are the things that, I remember the most. But it would have been a lot easier if you could simulate those pitches before you actually face those guys in the given game.
Like being able to see a Doc Gooden 12-6 curveball in a simulated way before you're actually facing that guy.
It might not. It's still going to be hard to hit it. Yeah. It'll be a lot easier of a process to recognize the ball out of his hand from a separation standpoint. Okay, this is not his fastball here. This is going to be his breaking ball.
I'll tell you what, I loved this conversation. I would love to have you on again. We'd love to have you on again as a guest after going back and just listening to this. Like, man, I wish I would have asked that question. I wish I would have asked that question. We've spent the last month that it seems like a lot of the guests that we've had on the podcast, it's more in, not that spirituality wasn't part of our conversation today, but it was a lot of, mental health, spirituality, being able to talk baseball within the.
But the fact of the matter is, we've talked with all these different people, but you were saying such a similar thing that they were saying, but from a different standpoint, from what you know right now.
It's all based on your life experiences.
Yep. Yeah. Which was awesome. I feel like that was the most powerful thing. I was like, I heard this from other people, but it came from a different perspective on your end, and that's really cool.
That's all it is. Yeah, we're all based. Our points of view in life have been developed all based upon our life experiences. Mine has happened to be in a professional sport for 40 years, looking at life from that vantage point the whole time, looking at it through players, managers, and coaches.
Where can the audience of the Building Men podcast find you and find the WIN program?
Just go on winreality.com on our website. You guys should jump on our website.
Oh, absolutely.
And take a look at. We have a baseball product and a softball product because we don't want to leave the girls out in the process too. And I'll tell you the next venture for us within our product, and we're so excited about this, is that we're going to introduce coaching within VR. So for an example, you're coaching a kid that's now living in Atlanta and you're in New Jersey, but you're his coach. You're going to sync up a time. He's going to get in his VR experience. You're going to get in one in your headset too. You're going to be with him in that experience, coaching him as if you were in the local batting cage down the street. But you're going to be he's going to be in his bedroom or living room, and you're going to be in yours. And you're going to be able to talk to him about things that you're seeing with his approach to his game. You're just not going to be in the same room doing it.
It's amazing. You just shrunk the coaching world down. You made everything accessible to coaches all over the world now.
Yeah, well, in a way, we'll allow coaches to be able to augment their income in a way that never dreamed of before. So basically how we envision this is that you'd go in our app. We'll have a drop-down screen. You'll be able to pick any coach that you want. We'll have guys with major league experience, it'll be up to your personal choice. You decide what you're going to charge the individual player. We don't get involved in that at all. That player links up with you. He goes through a lesson. If he likes the lesson, then you collected the compensation from him at that time. But then if he comes back, it's based upon your ability to make a connection with him from a coaching standpoint.
That's brilliant. It's tremendous. I had no idea this existed. I'm so happy that this. I have a daughter who plays. She's 13 years old. She's a catcher on her softball team. Wait until I tell her about this conversation today. It's going to blow her mind.
Yeah, the Quest headset. I think they're $299. We have nothing. We're not a hardware company. We're a software company. But our product is $24.99 a month, so it's very affordable. And she can go in there and simulate live at bats from a softball perspective.
That's tremendous.
Which is pretty cool.
I'll have to let her coach now. I pay enough for that team. Maybe that could be part of the registration.
What's fun with it, I did this with my younger son. I sequence him. So I would lay on his bed and I would say, I'd go fastball in, next pitch I go change up following a fastball in. And if he swung at a ball, I won. If he swung at a strike, he won. And it got highly competitive. Highly competitive.
You can simulate it to be outside of the strike zone too if you're coaching that.
Oh yeah, you can place the ball exactly where you want to put.
That is a beautiful.
Because that was the other thing as a coach. It was, you knew if it's an 0-2 count, it's going to be, something hard up and in, followed by something soft away, and you'd still swing at it. You knew it was coming, so it's almost like training your brain to the ball looks a certain way coming in. You train your brain not to swing at that pitch right there.
Yeah, well, that's all hitting is. It's cognitively training your brain over and over again through perfect practice to recognize the triggers of things that the game presents. And the more you do it the other thing about our product I really love, it's in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
So you can simulate things where games aren't controlled environments. But if you do this, like I encourage all of our users, use it 15, 20 minutes a day. You don't need to use it more than that, but be consistent with it. And then you'll see the advances of your performance the more consistently you use it.
So what we'll do, Dan, is we'll put all that information in the show notes for the Building Man podcast, and we'll promote this on social media so people can find WIN and find everything that you're doing. I think it's awesome. I wish I had this as a player. And
I just enjoyed talking to you guys today.
Oh, absolutely.
Beyond WIN, I really enjoyed meeting you. You're doing a really great thing. If I can help in any way, you've got my contact information. Just reach out to me.
Absolutely. We truly appreciate that. Dan O'Dowd, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. To find Building Men on Instagram is building.men, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. Anthony, any final words?
No, this has been great. That was very informative, and I think it was so cool. And I know my brother, and he was giddy talking about this stuff, so I think he appreciates it the most. So thank you, man. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's a real pleasure meeting you. Stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And God bless.
You too, absolutely. Thanks so much, Dan. We'll talk to you soon. Go a step further than you thought you can go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.